There is something profoundly sacred about a pure heart. It does not plot, it does not pretend. It loves in full, serves in silence, and sacrifices without asking for repayment. A pure heart is not naive, it is brave. For in a world where betrayal is common currency, to remain kind, to remain open is the rarest form of courage. But here lies the tragedy. The purest souls are often the ones who bleed the most, not because they are weak, but because others mistake their light for a vulnerability to exploit. They see gentleness and assume permission. They see patience and assume ignorance. And so, with calculating minds and selfish hands, they betray what was beautiful. They mock sincerity. They tear down innocence. They manipulate what was never meant to be broken. Yet the universe is not blind. There is a justice written into the very bones of existence, a haunting that follows those who knowingly harm the undefended. It begins as a whisper, a moment of guilt they try to silence, but the silence only makes the echoes louder. They see the kindness they destroyed in other faces, in fleeting memories, in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. What they broke starts to break them, not because vengeance is at play, but because conscience, long buried, begins to rise like smoke from a fire they thought had died. Have you ever wondered why betrayal haunts the betrayer more than the betrayed? Because to betray a pure heart is not just an act against a person, it is an act against God's design. It is a wound to the moral fabric of creation. The soul that dared to deceive someone who trusted them without suspicion, who believed in them without reservation, becomes a soul that cannot find rest. No matter how high they climb, how much they gain, or how deeply they try to forget, the echo of their wrong remains. And let us not forget the one who was betrayed. You might be that person, the one who gave everything with no hidden motives, the one who stayed, who forgave, who hoped. And in return you were left empty, broken, forgotten, perhaps even blamed. And yet, you survived. Not by becoming like them, but by holding on to your light. You didn't trade your purity for bitterness. You didn't let their actions define your character. That is your triumph. But make no mistake, your suffering has been recorded. Every silent tear, every night you asked why, and every time you chose compassion over revenge. It has not been lost. It is etched into the divine story of your life. And the ones who hurt you, they are not free. They walk with a shadow now, a memory, a regret, a haunting. The world may not see it. They may appear fine, even thriving, but truth is not measured by appearances. It is measured by the stillness of the soul, and a soul that has betrayed what was good and true will sooner or later be confronted by what it has done. The haunting does not come from the outside. It rises from within. So as you listen to this message, ask yourself, what kind of heart do I have? Am I the one who was betrayed or the one who betrayed? And if I was the one who suffered, do I believe that justice is real, even if unseen? Do I trust that purity is still power, even if it looks like weakness? Because the truth is, those who hurt you may run far, but they cannot outrun their own reflection. And eventually, that reflection begins to speak. The weight of memory cannot be escaped. There comes a moment, often in silence, when the world isn't looking, where memory becomes louder than noise, heavier than guilt, and darker than regret. This is the weight of betrayal, not on the shoulders of the one who was wronged, but on the conscience of the one who did the wounding. People believe they can move on after hurting someone pure. They believe time will heal not only their wounds but also erase their wrongdoing. But time does not heal a corrupted conscience. It magnifies it. When they betrayed your trust, they may have walked away thinking they won. They may have smiled, posted pictures, celebrated with others, and even mocked your pain. They convinced themselves it didn't matter, that you were too soft, too weak, too emotional. But what they didn't realize was that while you were crying on the outside, something eternal was stirring on the inside. And while they moved on to their next chapter, they unknowingly began writing their own downfall. Memory is not just a thought, it is a ghost. It is a presence that lingers. At first it's easy to ignore. They drown it out with distractions, music, people, pleasures, noise. But the human soul cannot hide from itself forever. It is in the quietest moments, in the stillness before sleep, or in the silence between laughter, that memory begins to speak. It doesn't shout, it whispers, it reminds, it accuses, and no matter how far they run, they can't unsee what they did to you. They remember the day you stayed loyal when they didn't deserve it. They remember the times you forgave them without them asking. They remember how your eyes still held hope, even when theirs were full of lies. And as time passes, those memories don't fade, they sharpen. Like glass beneath skin, they become more painful the longer they are ignored. The weight of memory is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It affects their sleep, their peace, their inner balance, and while they may smile in public, their private world begins to collapse, slowly under the pressure of what they refuse to confront. The betrayal that seems so simple, so justifiable in the moment, now becomes a wound they carry wherever they go. This is not about revenge. This is not about wishing harm. This is about truth. The truth that the one who betrayed a pure heart is not free. They are haunted not by your anger, but by their own choices. The very moments they thought were victories become the scenes they replay endlessly in their minds. You, the one who was betrayed, may think they forgot you, but no, they didn't. They see your face when they meet someone new and realize that no one else shines with that same light. They hear your voice in the background of their conscience. They try to laugh it away, talk it away, drink it away, distract it away, but it returns every single time. And when they look in the mirror, they don't just see their face. They see the version of themselves they became the moment they broke you. That image doesn't go away, it stays, because the truth, no matter how deeply buried, is still truth. And memory is its messenger. What was once pure now becomes their standard of loss. When someone walks away from a pure heart, they don't just lose a person, they lose something eternal. They lose a connection to goodness that cannot be replicated, only remembered. And what they once had freely, they now chase in every direction, only to find that nothing compares. That's the real torment of betrayal. Not that they did it, but that they now live in the shadow of what they destroyed. At first, they won't feel it, the rush of ego, the thrill of freedom, the intoxication of novelty, it keeps them blind. They surround themselves with distractions, new faces, louder voices, temporary highs. They try to convince themselves that they've upgraded, that they've moved on to something better, but deep down they know. They know that what you offered, the way you loved, the way you forgave, the way you stayed, was rare, uncommon, holy. And when the excitement fades, and the people they trusted prove to be shallow, when the connections they form lack depth, and the smiles they see don't carry the warmth you gave, they begin to miss you. But it's not just you they miss. It's what you represent, a purity they didn't value, a loyalty they misunderstood, a depth they were too shallow to appreciate. The haunting begins here, in their constant comparison. Every new connection is measured against the memory of you. Every conversation is weighed against your understanding. Every act of kindness is examined through the lens of what you once gave so freely, and none of it measures up. because what was once pure now becomes their standard of loss. They may never say it. Their pride won't allow them to confess that they miss you, but they do. Not in the way they might miss a friend or a partner. They miss you the way a starving man misses food he once threw away. They miss you in a way that aches. That hollows out their joy. That leaves a gnawing emptiness they try to fill with anything and everything, but nothing satisfies. This is the cost of betraying a pure heart. The joy they thought they'd find in freedom becomes the cage of longing. The laughter they chased becomes the echo of loneliness. They see glimpses of what they lost in the world around them, but it always fades too quickly. It always slips through their fingers. And as the years pass, they won't remember what they gained after betraying you, but they'll remember what they lost. They'll remember your warmth, your patience, your relentless belief in them when no one else saw potential. That memory will burn, not because you haunt them, but because truth does. They didn't just lose you, they lost the chance to be loved by someone whose heart didn't come with conditions. And that loss is not temporary, it's eternal. Because you can meet thousands of people in life, but once you've betrayed a soul that was pure, every other soul feels just a little less alive. They will see you rise, and it will burn their conscience. There is a unique kind of ache reserved for those who once underestimated someone they thought would never rise. When a person betrays a pure heart, they imagine they have extinguished something soft and defenseless, something they can walk away from without consequence. They picture your story ending where they left you, broken, silent, and forgotten. What they never prepare for is your rising. You see, when you carry truth in your spirit, when your heart remains clean even through pain, you are not defeated, you are refined. God doesn't abandon the innocent, He rebuilds them, not in vengeance, but in glory. Quietly, gently, and then suddenly you emerge. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with strength so deep, so undeniable, that even those who once looked down on you must now look up, and this is where their haunting begins. It is not your success alone that disturbs them, it is the peace you've found without them. They expected your collapse to be permanent. They expected you to lose yourself. But instead you've become someone they can no longer approach, not because of arrogance, but because of light. You are no longer who you were when they betrayed you. You have grown, and your growth is the reflection they fear. Because your rise reveals their fall. They see the strength in your silence now, the courage in your solitude. They watch from afar as others admire what they once disrespected. They see you shining in rooms they never thought you'd enter. They hear your name spoken with reverence, while theirs grows quieter in the corners of memory, and they cannot stop it. No matter what they try to build, it is tainted by what they destroyed. Their conscience begins to whisper, not because you're there, but because your absence is louder than your presence ever was. And every achievement you now experience becomes a mirror to their own cowardice. They realize they didn't just lose someone, they lost the very thing that could have elevated them too. There is no darkness more tormenting than watching someone thrive after you tried to break them. But your rising isn't a performance. You're not doing it to prove anything. You're simply becoming who you were always meant to be, with or without them. And that is the fire that burns in their conscience. Because they must now live with the truth that they walked away from something sacred. Not something perfect, but something real. And the guilt of knowing they gave up what others would cherish becomes an invisible chain wrapped tightly around their soul. So, when they smile in public and pretend to have moved on, remember, appearances are not peace. Peace does not live in pretending. It lives in truth. And their truth is this: they gave up a pure heart, and now they must watch that heart bloom without them. Not in revenge, but in restoration. not in noise, but in radiant silence. Their soul will starve for what they once abused. A soul cannot thrive when it has been severed from goodness. That is the hidden hunger of those who betray pure hearts. They walk away thinking they've gained something. They believe they've outgrown you, outsmarted you, or even outplayed you. But what they fail to understand is that a pure heart nourishes the soul in ways the world cannot. It doesn't just offer love. It offers depth, safety, and spiritual food, and once that is lost, no imitation will suffice. At first, they won't feel the absence. They will consume the pleasures of the moment, chase the noise, embrace the crowd, but the soul is not fed by noise. It is not satisfied by lust, applause, or ambition. The soul requires truth. It longs for connection rooted in honesty, in care, in sacrifice. It needs what you once gave. And so, the starvation begins. It's slow, invisible, unspoken, but it grows. They try to replace you with people who look good, sound confident, play the part, but every interaction feels hollow. Every connection feels thinner than the bond they broke, and they don't know why. Why are they so restless? Why are they so irritated even when things appear fine? Why does joy seem short-lived? Because the one who abuses a pure heart doesn't just lose someone, they lose a part of their own humanity. You reminded them of who they could have been. You reflected back to them the beauty they had forgotten in themselves. And when they turned on you, they turned on that reminder. Now all that remains is a shadow. They look for comfort but can't find it. They look for peace but it slips through their hands. They hunger but nothing satisfies. The world offers them endless options, distractions, people, desires, but their soul remembers you, not for how you looked, but for how you loved, not for what you had, but for who you were. That memory becomes the hunger pang that grows louder with each passing day. They may tell themselves that they don't miss you, that they've moved on, but that's not what their soul says. Their soul is still starving, not for your presence, but for the purity you carried, the integrity you lived with, the kindness you gave freely, even when they didn't deserve it. And this starvation doesn't end quickly. It lingers. It follows them into every relationship, every new start. It gnaws at them during celebrations and sits quietly beside them in moments of solitude. It is the kind of hunger that eats away at joy, slowly, from the inside out. This is the cost of betrayal, spiritual starvation. Because you cannot feed your soul by stepping on another's. You cannot thrive by abusing what was sacred. The body may be full, the life may be decorated, but the soul knows. It always knows. Regret grows louder than any justification. At first, betrayal wears a mask of confidence. The betrayer tells themselves they had reasons. They rewrite the story to sound less cruel, more logical. It had to happen. They were too much. I owed them nothing. This internal monologue becomes the temporary shield they use to numb the sting of their own action. But the truth is never silenced forever. It waits, and then it speaks. Regret is a slow echo. It does not shout immediately. It creeps in during ordinary moments. At the end of a long day, in the pause between conversations, in the quiet reflection of solitude. It whispers not with condemnation, but with memory. It reminds them of your tears, your patience, your hope, and with each remembrance, the justifications lose their power, because deep down they know the story they tell others is a lie. They know the version they constructed to feel right is built on selective memory. They conveniently forget how much you gave, how long you stayed, how deeply you cared. But the soul doesn't forget. The soul remembers everything, and the weight of truth becomes too heavy to carry in silence. Regret begins to press down on them like invisible chains. It robs them of joy in strange moments, when they hear a song that reminds them of you, when they see someone who reflects your light, when they witness a kind of love they once had and pushed away. It is in these moments that their excuses crumble. The walls they built to feel secure in their decision begin to fall apart. And here lies the cruelty of regret. It often arrives after restoration is no longer possible. They may want to return to what they had, to apologize, to reach out, but pride holds them back, or the damage is too deep, or you've already moved on. The opportunity to make things right has expired, and that finality haunts them. It plays over and over in their mind, not like a memory, but like a sentence. They begin to see how much they traded away for something temporary, something shallow, and every attempt to replace you ends in disappointment, not because others aren't good people, but because the space you once occupied was shaped by something irreplaceable, your sincerity. That level of devotion doesn't come around twice. Regret is not only emotional, it is spiritual corrosion. It begins to affect their peace, their self-worth, their sleep. They may continue pretending in public, but internally, they are unraveling. They don't laugh the same. They don't connect the same. Something is missing, and they know what it is. It's the presence of someone they once had and wounded. And that awareness doesn't fade. It intensifies with time. They thought they would forget you. Instead, they forgot how to live with peace. That's the tragedy of betrayal. It feels like power in the moment, but in time it becomes prison, and no amount of explanation, blame, or self-deception can silence the voice of truth when it chooses to speak. It speaks through guilt, through loneliness, through dreams and flashbacks, and once regret takes root, it begins to grow louder than any justification ever could. Life will offer them reflections, not replacements. The soul that betrayed you will try to find something better, someone easier, more exciting, more convenient. It's human nature to want to escape discomfort by reaching for distractions, but there's a divine irony woven into the consequences of betrayal. Life doesn't offer them replacements. It offers reflections, not to soothe their soul, but to confront it. What they see in others after you is not you. It's a distorted reminder, a resemblance, a flash, a fleeting echo of what they once had. They may meet someone who laughs like you, who carries a similar spirit, or who echoes your mannerisms. For a moment they feel that spark again. But just as quickly it fades, and they are left chasing shadows. This is not coincidence, it's design. Because when someone betrays a pure heart, they don't get to walk away without facing themselves. Life reflects their loss, not to punish them, but to awaken them. Every new person they try to connect with becomes a comparison, and every comparison reminds them of what they destroyed. What they once took for granted now becomes the measure for everything that follows. This creates a cycle of restlessness. They jump from one place to another, from one person to the next, hoping to recapture something they didn't even know was sacred at the time. But the heart is not foolish. It remembers what it truly valued, and it rejects anything that feels like a lesser version. So they keep searching and failing. The reflections they see are not meant to heal, they're meant to teach. Teach them that loyalty is rare, that kindness is not weakness, that real love isn't loud or dramatic, it's steady, selfless, and quiet. But by the time they understand this, they've already walked too far away from it. They may think they're cursed, but they're not. They're simply surrounded by echoes of their own decisions. Life is showing them not what they could have had, but what they threw away. It is not cruelty, it is clarity. The kind that doesn't shout, but whispers with a mirror. Even when they try to numb this realization with distractions or shallow praise, it keeps returning. The faces change, but the ache remains. The settings evolve, but the emptiness lingers. And that's the hidden wound betrayal creates. It not only severs the connection to someone good, it severs the path to inner peace. Eventually, they will realize that nothing life brings to them ever feels like you. And that realization will not come in a dramatic collapse. It will come in stillness, in the quiet moments when they see your reflection in others and know, deep in their bones, that it isn't you. It never will be. They didn't just betray a person, they betrayed a sanctuary, and now they walk the earth, surrounded by reminders, but unable to return. Their betrayal will become the beginning of their own unraveling. Betrayal is rarely seen as the start of a downfall, at least not by the one who commits it. In the beginning, it feels like control, like power, like a decision made on one's own terms. But that illusion fades, because what begins as a quiet betrayal of another becomes, over time, a loud betrayal of self. The moment they hurt a pure heart, they planted the seed of their own unraveling. They just didn't know it yet. A pure heart is not just a person, it's a mirror. When you're close to someone who walks in goodness, their presence reveals you to yourself. Your motives, your integrity, your flaws. It's not because they judge you, but because their light exposes what's still in shadow. And when someone chooses to betray that kind of heart, they are not just walking away from someone, they are walking away from their own chance at transformation. That's where the unraveling begins. Silently, slowly. A missed opportunity here, a fractured relationship there, an unexplained tension in places that once brought joy. They may continue functioning, even excelling on the surface, but deep inside, a split has formed, a rift between who they appear to be and who they truly are. And that gap grows with time. Because betrayal doesn't live alone, it breeds more. Once they cross that line, their internal compass shifts. What used to be wrong starts to feel acceptable. What once brought guilt now brings indifference. They justify, they rationalize, they suppress, but each justification pulls another thread loose. Each compromise weakens their inner structure. They become someone they once vowed never to become. And they don't even see it happening. They may find themselves repeating old patterns, hurting people without reason, sabotaging good things, losing trust, losing peace, losing the ability to feel deeply. Their connections become surface level. Their achievements feel hollow. Because when you betray someone who loved you purely, you also betray the part of yourself that was capable of loving in return. At some point, they'll look in the mirror and feel like a stranger to themselves. It won't happen overnight. It may take months, even years. But the moment comes. It always does. That cold realization that the person they become was shaped not by growth, but by decay. And they will trace the start of that transformation back to the moment they chose to hurt someone who did nothing but care for them. Life has a way of allowing people to carry their masks for a while, but the mask doesn't age well. It begins to crack. And when it does, the true face underneath reveals the pain they tried to hide, the guilt they tried to bury, and the hollowness they tried to fill with ego. Their unraveling won't look dramatic to outsiders. It may not involve tragedy or scandal. No, it's subtler than that. More personal, more psychological. It looks like never feeling truly known again. It looks like being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. It looks like having everything but enjoying nothing. It looks like overthinking every night before sleep and never waking up excited to live. It's an invisible falling apart, a soul that loses itself in a maze of its own making. And the deeper tragedy, they'll know why. They'll remember the moment they turned their back on something sacred. They'll remember your kindness, your loyalty, your belief in them. And it will gnaw at them, not because they want to return to you, but because they can't return to the version of themselves that existed when they were loved by you. That version is gone, lost at the moment of betrayal. They may try to fix it by grasping at new people, new goals, new identities, but all of it will feel like patchwork on something fundamentally torn. The unraveling won't stop because it didn't begin outside, it began within. They created the fault line when they chose to deceive someone who would have stood by them through anything. And that fracture keeps widening until they realize the damage wasn't to your life, it was to their own. This is the unspoken curse of betrayal, that in choosing to wound a pure heart, they condemn themselves to a life where they can't fully trust anyone else, because they know what they did, and deep down, they believe others might do the same to them. That paranoia, that doubt, it's the echo of their own sin, projected forward into every relationship, every future. It becomes harder to build anything solid when your foundation was built by tearing someone else's down. Every success comes with a shadow. Every moment of happiness feels fragile. Every compliment feels like a lie they don't deserve. And that internal unraveling becomes harder and harder to silence, because the haunting doesn't come from outside forces. It's not karma punishing them in the way movies portray. It's truth. Quiet, piercing, undeniable truth, reminding them of who they were, what they had, and what they became when they chose betrayal over loyalty. They will be forced to live in the silence they created. Betrayal doesn't always end with a confrontation. Sometimes it ends with silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of absence, of a voice no longer calling, of a heart no longer waiting. And this, more than anything, is what haunts the one who betrayed a pure heart, the deafening quiet of what they pushed away. At first they welcome the silence. They mistake it for freedom. No more expectations, no more emotional accountability, no more conversations that expose who they really are. But over time, that silence begins to shift. It no longer feels like liberty, it starts to echo. Every quiet moment becomes filled with reminders of you, not your words, but your absence, not your presence, but the space where you used to be, and they are forced to sit in it. You see, when a person wounds someone who gave them nothing but truth, their punishment is not always external. Sometimes it's internal. It's the long, empty pauses in their day that were once filled with your laughter. It's the subtle ache when they look at their phone and realize no message is coming. It's the holidays, the memories, the quiet songs that now carry ghosts instead of joy. They thought they were escaping noise, when really they were severing connection. And the silence they created, it becomes a chamber. Not a peaceful one, but a closed room where their conscience now lives. It speaks to them through subtle moments. When they hear something you used to say, when they visit a place you once loved, when they experience something beautiful and instinctively wish to share it, but realize there is no one to receive it. That's the torment. Not the silence itself, but the knowing that you were once there and now you're not. People think betrayal ends with the act, but it doesn't. The act is just the beginning. What follows is a long unraveling of everything they once knew as stable. And the more they settle into their new life, the people, the distractions, the noise, the louder your silence becomes. It haunts in its stillness, because it is the one thing they cannot rewrite. They can lie to others, even to themselves, but they cannot lie to silence. It doesn't argue. It reveals, and in that silence, they will remember everything they chose to forget. They will remember the times you forgave without being asked, the times you reached out even after being pushed away, the times you stayed kind even while hurting. These memories won't knock politely, They will invade their still moments like shadows at dusk, soft but impossible to ignore. And every time they try to fill the silence with noise, parties, people, pleasures, it returns, it waits, it's patient, because silence has no need to rush. It always finds its way back. Eventually they will come to fear the quiet, not because of what it lacks, but because of what it contains, the truth, the memory of you, not as someone who begged to stay, but as someone who walked away with dignity, someone who didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't beg for closure. You simply stopped trying, and that is what pierces the deepest. Because the human heart can handle anger, it struggles to handle indifference. It can defend against arguments, it collapses in the face of calm departure. They may pretend not to notice, they may even mock the silence for a time. But when the crowd thins, when the applause fades, and when everyone else goes home, they will sit with what they've done, alone. And that aloneness is not physical, it's spiritual. It's the soul's awareness that it has lost something irreplaceable. Not because you weren't willing to fight for them, but because they were never willing to fight for you. And what could have been the sound of mutual growth has now become the silence of irreversible loss. They once had access to your thoughts, your love, your kindness, but now their calls would go unanswered. Their questions would remain rhetorical. Their regrets, if ever spoken, would echo in a void of their own making. And that is the cost of betraying a pure heart. Not only losing the person, but losing the right to be heard by them. So now they live in that silence. They may have conversations, but none that matter. They may be surrounded by people, but none who see their soul. They may hear laughter, but none that feels like yours. Because betrayal doesn't just end a relationship. It ends the soundtrack of a life they once had, and in its place is the quiet, consistent hum of remorse. A haunting silence that asks only one question over and over again. Why did I let them go? But you're not there to answer. And that is what tears at their mind. Not your words, not your wrath, but your silence. A silence that speaks of self-respect, of boundaries, of a decision not to chase after those who only knew how to break, not build. And in that silence, they are left with themselves, and the echo of everything they could have cherished but chose to destroy. Because at the end of it all, it isn't your presence they fear, it's your silence. The weight of what they chose, they thought your heart was fragile because it was pure. They believed your love made you easy to leave, and your kindness made you easy to forget. But purity is not weakness. It is strength clothed in gentleness. It is clarity wrapped in compassion. It is power hidden in silence. And they never saw it for what it was, until it was gone. What they fail to understand is that when you betray a pure heart, you are not simply walking away from someone soft. You are turning your back on someone rare, someone sacred, someone whose love was real in a world where love is often conditional, calculated, or performative. And when that kind of heart is broken, it does not seek revenge. It does not fight to be seen. It walks away with dignity, with grace, and with God, and that is where the haunting begins. You didn't have to curse them. Life did it for you, through mirrors they can't break, through memories they can't silence, through regret they can't unlive. Because while you were rebuilding, they were remembering. While you were healing, they were hiding. And while you were growing stronger in the silence, they were being torn apart by it. Let that truth settle in your soul today. The one who betrayed you may forget many things, but they will never forget the sound of your silence, the depth of your love, or the weight of what they chose to destroy. So, to the pure-hearted, the ones who were lied to, discarded, or betrayed, lift your head. You were never weak for loving. You were never foolish for believing. You were never wrong for giving too much. Your heart was a gift, and though they mishandled it, your story is not about what they did. It's about what God is doing now. Because the greatest revenge isn't found in retaliation. It's found in restoration. And while they are haunted by echoes of what they lost, you will be carried by the hand of the one who saw it all. The betrayal was not your ending. It was their beginning of loss, and your beginning of becoming. If this message spoke to your heart, if it echoed something buried deep inside you, then know this: you are not alone. There is power in your pain, wisdom in your waiting, and beauty in your becoming. Keep rising, keep trusting, keep your heart pure even after the break. Because one day, the ones who broke it will look back and realize that in losing you, they lost everything. Leave a comment below. Did this message reflect your story? What part of this speech resonated the most with you? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more truth, healing, and powerful reminders that you're not alone. You were chosen not to suffer, but to survive, and now to shine. Success Call.